It's good to see you all here on this Monday. My name is Sam Barros, and I'm the program manager with the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund. Today, this is our information session, largely where we're going to be sharing information out to you all on the full draft of the climate investment plan, our inaugural climate investment plan. And so I'm going to walk through the agenda and some participation guidelines here in a second. Okay, first up, we're a little bit behind, but we'll get caught up. Just a little welcome and introductions. I'm going to just shoot over to the at least a couple of folks that have more active roles here on our side, on our team for this information session. And then we'll do a virtual participation check just to let you all know how to participate in the meeting. We'll jump into the climate investment plan draft, talk about an overview, jump into the funding code categories, and then share a summary of the changes that took place between our preliminary draft that we released in March and the draft before you all today. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can provide feedback and give about 15 minutes for folks to ask questions at the end of the meeting. And so with that, I'm just going to turn it first to June Reyes, who's supporting this meeting, to introduce herself, and then James Valdez, and then Katie Lister as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is June Reyes. I'm here to help answer questions in the chat. So if you need anything, we'll be monitoring the chat actively.
Thank you, Jim. James.
Hi, everybody. James Valdez, he, him pronouns, PCEF staff, and I also will be helping out with the Q&A.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Lister, she, her programs with the PCEF team.
You. Okay. All right, y'all. The chat box will be open for the duration of the meeting. And as folks said, as James said, we're going to be just tracking that. So if you've got questions, please enter them in the chat box, and we're going to take those into queue and we'll answer them at the end during the Q&A session. As well, when we get towards the end, towards the Q&A session, please use the raise hand function to raise your hand, and then we'll call on you. Encourage you all to use your videos. It's nice to see faces, but also know that that can be much sometimes. The microphone will generally be muted for folks until we get to the Q&A session. This meeting is being recorded, so you will be able to access the content of this meeting later on. And then shortly here, we will be having our captioner join us, and we will have our captioning. But right now, we at least do have Kevin, who
started. Sorry, Sam. The captioning is good.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we were waiting on them, and our captioning is good. So if you need captioning, please go to your settings, your menu settings, and go to settings and show subtitles, and you'll be able to see the captions for the meeting. And then we also have Kevin, who is our ASL interpreter. And so if you need that, please pin Kevin to your own screen so you have access to that. Okay. Just stepping back, within what is the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund? The fund does generate $100 million annually to invest in efforts to address climate change that advance racial and social justice. It was passed by a ballot measure in November 2018 with 65% of Portland voters. And notably, it is the first climate fund measure created and led by communities of color in the US as part of, though, a broad coalition with progressive businesses, labor, environmental groups, and many others. It is funded with a 1% gross receipt surcharge on Portland sales for corporations that make over $1 billion nationally and at least $500,000 locally on their Portland sales, with certain exclusions. And to date, we've funded over $145 million in grants through our community responsive grants pathways. And so as folks think about this, we generally encourage folks to think not from a scarcity mindset, but from an abundance mindset. This is our inaugural climate investment plan, and we will have the next one after this. Okay. And I think I didn't share this before, but do also encourage folks to introduce themselves, and I should have introduced themselves via the chat box. That's always nice to know others that are around, that are here with us. And so also encourage people to introduce yourselves in the chat box, who you are, who you're with, as well. Okay. So we're going to just do a little context setting on the climate investment plan, what it is and what it's taken to get here. And as you see in here, there's a QR link if you'd like to access that, just to download the draft and have it handy. So first, the climate investment plan is in response to direction from Portland City Council in fall of 2022 as they amended our code and directed us to develop the climate investment plan, which will serve as a 5-year roadmap that describes the kind of community projects we will be funding and the strategic programs we'll be funding in support of investing in clean energy projects and climate solutions within the community. Now, the plan has been developed, and it is grounded in climate research. It aligns with our climate emergency work plan, and it has involved numerous rounds of community engagement and community input, of which this is just another round. And then within the plan, we use an equity framework for all of our programs, which considers the benefit to frontline communities, the implementation feasibility of the programs, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and then accountability frameworks to make sure that we are providing this in service to the climate and community. Okay. Now, this briefly just describes a little overlay of all the folks that have been involved in developing this inaugural climate investment plan and where we are today. So we've hosted topic area roundtables and brought together subject matter experts. We've hosted technical experts from our Bureau partners, as well as other local government entities. We've brought in community inputs through virtual events, online surveys, in-person workshops, and we've engaged and worked with the PCEF committee, providing them regular monthly briefings and soliciting their input and feedback as we've developed a plan. And lastly, we've also hosted community review panels that have been focused on youth perspectives, as well as perspectives from our frontline communities with an emphasis around ensuring that we are bringing disability inclusion through both those panels. But here we're in this circular stage, we're at the full draft stage. So this is going to be really the last formal public comment round where we're soliciting input from the public on elements of the plan before we turn around and move to making a proposal that we're bringing to the Portland Clean Energy Fund Committee for their deliberation and ultimate recommendation to City Council for deliberation and hopefully approval in September 2023. So getting to this full draft before you all. First, this is building on the preliminary draft that we released in March of 2023 and the public comments we solicited then. As part of this draft and developing the preliminary draft, as well as this draft, it's using information from those workshops, surveys, roundtable meetings, and all those other public engagement and input that we shared beforehand. Additionally, it leverages a significant amount of program history and experience to date in awarding well over, reviewing well over 300 grants, awarding well over 110 plus grants and 145 million in funding. So there's a lot that's going into this draft, and it also additionally builds on a robust comment period we engaged in for the preliminary draft. So with that, let's jump into what is actually within the full draft of the climate investment plan. So first, from 2023 through 2028, we will distribute an estimated 750 million across 7 funding categories. The vast majority of that will go into renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. That's 63%, or a little bit over 450 million. Then transportation decarbonization will receive about 16%, or a little bit over 120 million. Green infrastructure, 10%, or a little bit over 70 million. And then we've got climate jobs, workforce, and contractor development to make sure that the folks that are getting to work on these projects, that we're diversifying that sector, growing that sector. And we've got about a little bit over 45 million going to that area. Then there's regenerative agriculture at 3%, or roughly 20 million, capacity building at 11 million, or 1%, and then other. So other carbon reducing projects that create community benefit that don't neatly fall in these areas. And that's roughly at 2%, or 2 million of the total 750 million. All right. So as you open up the actual full draft and you step back, we want to provide some context. It is a long document. It's 60 plus pages. And so as part of this, we want to get you all a sense for where you're going to find different pieces of information and what it's going to relate to, because the structure of the document is important. And so first, when you open up the document at the top, we have our background information where we define our priority populations, where we share the revenue forecast and the overall program purpose. And then there's a range of grounding values that are going to be relevant to the entire program and all the programs you see in all the subsequent sections. And so again, this is in the top 15 pages. So 1, we start out with community engagement, our approach to it and how we value it. 2, we talk about the equity and climate framework. And this is a framework that we've applied to each of the strategic programs in order to validate and ensure that they should be within this plan. 3, overall, we talk about what does it mean to build and do this work in partnership with community, recognizing that this is our first year 5 climate investment plan, and our next one will look different. And through that time, we will continue to build community capacity within frontline communities to do this work. So what does it look like? And that is important to the whole document. And so that sits up front. We also talk about accountability, transparency, measurement, reporting, and evaluation. And so as part of that, just how do we see that? How are we going to do that overall? And how are we going to share back to the public? How are we doing on implementing this climate investment plan? And how should folks expect to see that? And then lastly, there's workforce and contractor equity, which spans the entire program. And so we talk about what our program-wide workforce and contractor equity approach and some of the goals. So that all sits at the front of the document, and it relates to the entirety of our the entirety of the relevant sections that follow. So the rest of the document is organized outside of that first 15 pages along the funding categories themselves. And so these next sections are just going to describe how each of those sections are organized, so you have a sense as you're working through it, what you should expect to see. First, within each of our funding categories, and we described those earlier, it's those 7 categories, you will see an initial name of the funding category, the 5-year, the allocation for community responsive grants, and then some of the actual quantified goal measures for our community responsive grants. So we start with each funding category around what are the community responsive grant allocation, what are the goals for those? And as a reminder for folks, these are projects and programs that are designed and led by and implemented by community-based organizations. So that is what we've historically done, and that's the start of each of the sections. And so subsequent and following a description for the community responsive grant allocation for each section, you will see we're going to get into the strategic programs. And so for each strategic program, we describe, and they need to really align with this equity and climate framework, which I described earlier. So you'll see what kind of benefits each strategic program is providing to frontline communities, the implementation feasibility, the climate impact, and the GHG reductions, and then a bit about accountability. And so these all need to be answered in the affirmative, and the strategic programs are designed around ensuring that they meet this equity and climate framework. And so for each of those, as you move through the document, you're going to see the name of the strategic program, the 5-year funding allocation, the outcomes that we expect to see. So how many homes, what kind of benefits do we expect to see for communities? And then what are specific goal measures that we're quantifying and expecting to target? And then lastly, just what is our approach, or not lastly, but at least on this slide, what is our approach to the investments? What's the investment strategy? How are we, rolling the program out, or other details that are going to be important for folks to know? Additionally, you'll see just elements of who may administer the program, who may be eligible to receive funding. And so this will look different across the programs, but generally it's focused on administration, as well as any really targeted or focused workforce and contractor development elements that are relevant for the strategic program. So not every single program will have this, but in some strategic programs, we have an additional targeted investment that's focused on supporting workforce and contractor development in that program. And this will all start to make sense as you work through the document. And so then just stepping back, as we talk about what does it mean to advance climate justice through this climate investment plan, I wanted to give just a high-level overview and a sampling of some of the outcomes and goals that we expect from some of the programs. And this is some of the details that you will see within this climate investment plan. And so within climate jobs, workforce, and contractor development, we're aiming to train up and expose about 1,000 low-income and youth of color to climate careers. We're aiming to train about 700 to 900 workers in climate jobs. We're aiming to train about 75 to 125 contractors into expanding into climate action-related services and expanding their offerings so they can do more of that type of work. That's just a sampling of it. Within the renewable energy and energy efficiency funding category, we're naming, and you'll see across it, you'll see a lot more details around the sorts of improvements we expect to see in our multifamily units. And so in our single family units, in our commercial buildings. So here we actually name, we expect to improve about 2,600 unregulated multifamily units, make clean energy improvements in 3,250 single family homes, and improve or make clean energy improvements in 65 small commercial buildings. So that sort of detail is captured in this current draft. We also named some things like we expect to see rent stabilized in participating multifamily units from 3 to 9 years. So giving that additional layer of detail. Within transportation decarbonization, some of the outcomes or goals that we name is we anticipate and project distributing 6,000 electric bikes to income qualified households. We also expect to distribute 15,000 to 20,000 transportation wallets distributed to income qualified households. So there's more details for each of those programs. So that's just a snippet for those 3 funding categories. For our green infrastructure funding category, we expect to support 800 to 2,000 low and moderate income households in receiving critical tree pruning services. We expect to increase trees on public and private property by about 15 to 25,000 over the life of the CIP. And we expect to plant substantial street trees along 82nd Avenue to provide meaningful shade along the corridor. Within regenerative agriculture, we expect to add at least 40,000 square feet of land dedicated to regenerative urban agriculture, as well as increase more local food production on urban farms and backyard and community gardens. Within our organizational capacity building funding category, we expect to support 16 to 20 nonprofits with increased capacity so that they can implement and invest in and work on advancing climate justice projects. And then within our other carbon reducing projects, we expect to increase access to fair and flexible capital or financing for consumer and business energy upgrades, as well as electric vehicles for commercial use, including ride hailing or delivery services. Additionally, we expect to support student-led climate initiatives across all middle and high schools in Portland. So that just gives you a snippet of some of the things, and it's worth to go through as you see any individual area that you're interested in to track some of the more specific outcomes and goals that we're projecting in this draft. So this next piece, just going to give folks a summary of the changes. And so what you saw there was the kind of information and detail that is in this draft. Now we're going to just talk through the actual changes for folks that paid attention, dove in, and provided comment on the preliminary draft of the climate investment plan. We want to make sure you're able to see the changes. We know that that's important, and want to walk you through some of those changes between the preliminary draft in March, as well as the draft that's before you in now. And so every one of your comments were read and considered, and we summarized and provided key takeaways on our website. So encourage you all to navigate over there. You'll both see a summary of the key takeaways of everyone's public comments and comments that were provided to us between March and April, as well as, and so it includes a summary on that page, as well as all of the comments themselves. So we just want to, in transparency, show folks what did we receive and how did we synthesize that information and how do we summarize it. All that feedback was really important in helping us both refine in getting to this draft, but a lot of that feedback is also going to be really important because some of it isn't going to inform this draft, this full draft of climate investment plan, because it's a lot of detail and it's important, but it's in some instances more detail than was relevant for this draft and the level of this draft. So much of that feedback is also going to be considered as part of the RFP process when we move beyond this climate investment plan and start developing requests for proposals. And so just want to acknowledge that for a lot of the feedback we heard, some of it we said it's really important, really valuable, and that's something that we're going to use to help us as we design the RFP. And as overall, as we evaluated the feedback, we incorporated different bits of feedback based on our program goals, as well as feasibility. All right. At a high level, across the entire document, We really focused on increasing the content accessibility by one, adding an executive summary, and two, adding a visual diagram of the climate investment plan development process at the front. Now, there's going to be other adjustments and other content accessibility features we will add as part of the draft that eventually goes to City Council, but this is what we were able to do for this particular draft. Across the document, we strengthen the focus on equity by emphasizing the importance of community partnerships up front and noting that that spans across all of our programs. We emphasize the importance of workforce and contractor equity throughout the program and spoke to it in several parts of the program, as well as just worksite safety and job culture that's going to be important towards increasing the diversity of folks working on our projects. We emphasized accountability by adding and really speaking to that section at the front of the document, as well as adding and updating goal measures throughout the document. So I want folks to know this is what we're aiming for, and this is what you all can expect us to be tracking towards these sorts of goal measures. And so we added that, how we were going to do that up front, we added those specific measures throughout the document too. And lastly, we just enhanced the clarity and comprehensiveness by adding footnotes on additional program details, including how we're coming to some of our estimates, as well as how each of these strategic programs or investments align with the city's climate emergency work plan. Now, jumping into just some highlights of program-specific changes. These are not comprehensive. There is a document of the summary of changes that are posted to our website, so you can get a little bit more in-depth, line by line, what are the things that changed between the preliminary draft and this draft. But this is just some highlights. So within clean energy, we added the expected number of units, homes, and buildings served across each of those programs. We provided clarity on the percentage of any given budget and how much of it can go towards life, health, safety, accessibility, or enabling repairs that are often critical in order to do the clean energy improvements as well. Within transportation decarbonization, we added information and rationale around how we're prioritizing youth, as well as increasing access for those with disabilities in that funding category. We clarified the program roles for the e-bike program, as well as clarified the next steps and scope of the transportation decarbonization work group, which is going to be really important for that area, given that it's a new funding area for us. Within access to fair and flexible capital, we built out a new strategic program. So we parsed that out a little bit and provided more clarity. And now that's focused on targeted electric vehicle financing tools. Within green infrastructure, we revised the name to Tree Canopy Maintenance Reserve, as opposed to Green Infrastructure Maintenance Reserve, to better reflect the purpose of that funding category or strategic program. And we added about 2.2 additional that's allocated for green infrastructure as a sub-allocation of the 82nd Avenue Climate Infrastructure and Community Resilience Program, so that we can make sure that there's a targeted investment along the corridor in green infrastructure. Within regenerative agriculture, on the community responsive grant side, we reduced that allocation by $1 million in order and in part to increase the allocation for strategic program 9, which is focused on increasing and expanding the availability of land that's focused on regenerative agriculture within the Portland area. And then for workforce and contractor development, we both added details along as part of all the sub-allocations across the programs, but we also added program-wide diverse contractor and workforce utilization goals in Appendix 1. So that's important for folks to just track, and that speaks to what are the kind of goals that we have on diverse worker utilization, which will speak to how many people of color, how many women, how many folks with disabilities are on jobs, as well as how many contractors owned by our priority populations are leading on these jobs. And so stepping back from that, I want to just in the next bit really walk you all through how to provide, what kind of input we're seeking and how to provide input in this phase, and make sure you all are aware of those opportunities. As this is really an important point, or one of our last points where we're getting that feedback, digesting all of this over the coming weeks before we start deliberating and working through this content with the PCEF committee. So one, just in terms of inputs we're seeking, what elements of this plan excite you because they align with the program goals and meet desired outcomes that you see that others see. It's really important. It's important, and as much as we want to see comments that help critique, interrogate, and help make these things better, we also want things that support and uplift the good things that you already see, so that we can surface those and elevate those and celebrate those. Additionally, is there anything vital that's missing from the current draft of the CIP as you look at it on the whole and the level that we're trying to put this out at? We will take your input in this final round of engagement to revise the CIP plan and issue a final draft. And the draft will ultimately be proposed to the PCEF committee, and they will deliberate on it and then make a recommendation to City Council in July of this year. So for all of this, we want to ultimately hear what's possible when we invest in community grounded solutions to address the climate crisis. And so it's really just, it's important that we take all comments seriously, and we want to bring that in so that we can continue our rounds of making our products better, service the community. All right. As far as how you can provide feedback, we've got a virtual information session here, which is mainly focused on making sure you're aware and you understand the plan, how it's structured, and the opportunities to provide feedback. We'll have a little Q&A here shortly where we will answer questions on this. But in addition to that, we will have an in-person briefing for the plan and an open house this coming Wednesday from 4 to 6 p.m. at Alberta House. And so encourage folks to sign up if you're interested in attending there, so we have a good sense for some of the headcount. But also just drop in. We will also host a virtual listening session on June 1st between 5 and 6:30. And this is an opportunity for folks who want to make sure that you're speaking to staff, because that's important, and you just want that because it may be an easier way to provide comment. We will also have a virtual listening session where it'll be equal with folks that are providing written comment. It's just another format, so we can provide that avenue. And then we encourage folks to submit written comments through our online survey or email us at cleanenergyfund@portlandoregon.gov. And certainly I'd probably point folks first to the survey, as that helps channel and direct and organize feedback as part of our staff review. But we'll take your comments. They're equally valuable via email or through the listening session as well. All right. I will take a breath with that and turn it over. Know that we've got questions in the chat. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it to my colleague, James, to bring us into the Q&A.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Sam. And we have a few questions that started coming in. We'll go ahead and take a few that were in the chat. We have a queue running. And then also, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll develop a stack and call on you as well. So, Sam, do you want me to read the questions too, or? Okay. So the first question is from Michael Hall. And the question is, Quiet Clean PDX is a grassroots campaign working for incentives for small lawn and garden care contractors to transition from gas to electric equipment. We are looking for a partner organization for a PCEF grant application. Might PGE be a possible partner? Are there other organizations that are working on helping lawn and garden businesses and workers?
Thank you, Michael. It's an important, good question. And one I'll just name, I'll start with that. There have certainly been some existing grants that we've made as an organization to groups like the Micro Enterprise Service of Oregon that have been working on planning on thinking through how they can support contractors on electric lawn equipment. But additional funding opportunities will be available through our community responsive grants that we anticipate releasing after City Council takes action on this in September. So we anticipate releasing that in fall of 23. And that would be the opportunity where nonprofit organizations will be able to apply both individually or in partnership with other organizations like electric utility companies to apply for projects. So important question, and we'll probably provide more information on that, or there'll be more, or it'll be clear when we get to that community responsive grant solicitation in the fall of this year around how to apply for that.
All right, thanks. And let's see, second question is about the rent stabilization, and the question of what determines if the rent stabilization is required for 3 to 5 years within the clean energy related strategic programs?
It really is going to be dependent on the investment we're making in a given space. If we're making a larger investment in unregulated multifamily property, then we expect to see a longer rent stability agreement. And so that will ultimately be dependent on the agreement or the particular investment package that is developed between our program as well as the landlord or the property owner and the kind of investment they want to make in their building. So a simple way is just they're taking on the maximum investment that we're offering. There's going to be a longer rent stability agreement that they're going to have to sign on to in order to get that.
All right, thanks. And feel free to, again, ask questions in the chat. I think the next couple ones I have are more comments, but I guess if you can address these as well. A comment that the city hasn't shown itself to be very climate literate or climate adept, and worry that it has to sign off on this plan and incorporate into its climate action plan. Some follow-up conversation and about whether that was intended for the city as in bureaus or the city council specifically. So yeah, Sam, do you want to kind of talk about the interaction there?
Yeah, the city council is ultimately the body that, yes, is expected and is required to approve of this plan in order for us to move forward. But a big part of this, and what we've said from the very get-go, this is, and from its origins, PCEF is a community-led, a community-born initiative. And so the community engagement and the vision and values of the community are important throughout this. And it's why we do what we do and the way we do it, and why we've designed the process the way we have. So that's important. That remains important, and that remains important to the committee, which is charged with making a recommendation to City Council. That said, we work diligently to make sure the work that we do does not stand alone, and that it aligns with other things the city is doing. And so the climate emergency work plan was approved by City Council last fall, last late summer, fall of 2022. And an important part was making sure that the work we're doing within this climate investment plan aligns. And so it either directly or indirectly supports the climate emergency work plan across many areas.
Sam, and we have a few more, I guess another comment that I'd like to celebrate and share my excitement for the allocations to school districts, particularly David Douglas, that it will potentially have such a big impact to climate focused change on those campuses and to ensure the safety of our students in future. So yeah, thanks for that comment. I think I'll transition to call on somebody. Katie, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I just wanted to also echo what a lot of folks have said in the chat. This is very exciting, and I'm so happy to be here. And I think that this is incredible. Yeah, just thank you for all of your work. I just want to say that to start. Also, I represent a nonprofit that acts on behalf of tribes, and we're technically outside of the Portland metro area. So we're not able to access a lot of the funding directly, but are still paying attention to PCEF and all of that. In the key takeaways document, you actually addressed we had submitted feedback during that time frame, and I think you directly addressed some of our questions around geographic location. And in it says, workforce contractor development projects can serve individual. This is highly specific, so sorry, but maybe some other folks on the call have a similar case. But workforce/contractor development projects can serve individuals and businesses in the broader Portland MSA. Can you unpack that for me a bit? Does this mean that we could potentially contract with Portland-based workforce or contractors and free up access to some of those funds for our project?
Yeah, let me, I'll answer that as, and there may be just follow up what you need to do, Katie. So encourage you all to reach out to if this doesn't do it justice. For projects that PCEF is investing in that has is a physical improvement, let's say that we're either planting trees or installing a community solar array or or investing in backyard gardens. Those projects where there's a physical footprint that we are investing in supporting directly have to fall within the city of Portland boundaries. However, there are investments that we make in training folks and training the next generation, next workforce, so that we've got more diverse and in a greater greater depth of work, skilled workforce to do these projects, as well as, and that's not just workforce, but it's also training contractors. So we have more contractors that are able to do this work, that are able to service these scopes of work. As part of those training efforts, we recognize that contractors, as well as workers that work on projects within the city of Portland, come from all over. They don't all live strictly within the city of Portland. And so we can invest in supporting training workers or supporting developing contractors or supporting contractors on PCEF scopes of work, on PCEF types of scopes. When I say scopes of work, I mean in climate action related services or careers. We can train them if they live within the greater metropolitan statistical area. And so what that's just to say is, if someone lives within the city of Gresham and they're interested in doing a pre-apprenticeship training program that's focused on the clean energy trades, we can support that individual and support them in getting that training.
Okay, that's super clarifying and I think helpful, and I'll look into it more. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, going down through the questions. I'll go back there. A question of how can we see exactly where the money is coming from, i.e. the amount paid by each retailer? Into the clean energy surcharge. Yeah.
Yep, this is in some ways an easy one. We can't see it. The simple answer to this one is that tax information, tax receipts like this is highly confidential and privileged information, and so we as a program don't even have line of sight into that, and only the city's revenue division has access to that information. So certainly folks can make speculation around, around businesses that are either publicly traded and file their information in a certain way. And so sure, some folks can take a guess as to who's likely covered, but we actually have no line of sight or access into who is covered by the clean energy surcharge.
Thanks, Sam. Another comment here that they're just starting to review, but applaud the improvements to make the plan more accessible, like the executive summary. And yes, and thank you. And we appreciated that feedback early on in the process of additional information that people were looking for. Another question of what are the repercussions for contractors that are neither diverse nor inclusive? What mechanisms and or conduits exist for the public to report to PCEF that certain contractors or grantees that has aligned itself do not reflect PCEF values?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is an important question. I would say it's still very live, and it's going to take place over the coming, I'd say, months and even beyond that, as we develop our specific requests for proposals and design the individual strategic programs and offerings. We do have a High Roads Advisory Council, and these are the sorts of questions that we will be discussing with them, some of which we've already begun discussing. So I'd say we don't have a clear answer to this particular question. We do have, and folks can navigate to our workforce and contractor equity agreement page on our website. That is going to evolve as part of this climate investment plan and the strategic programs. But we've got some initial answers around how we've approached this. And I would say there's more work to be done around how we essentially how we support compliance with our workforce and contractor equity goals.
Thanks, Sam. Just also wanted to note that there is monitoring of the grantees and contractors to see if they're meeting those goals. And there's also a process that is part of the implementation for information cards that are required to be handed out to all workers who are on PCEF projects. And so that includes contact information to report if the wages and the safe and respectful work site requirements are not being met. And this is, you know, an evolving piece of our program that we are still building. So yeah, really good question though.
Thank you, James, for writing that.
Additional question is, how can we see after the fact exactly what projects the money gets spent on, i.e. what organization and what project is funded?
Yeah. This is a good question. Similar to what we've done in the past, where if you go to the city's website and you type in PCEF RFP number 1 or PCEF RFP number 2, you will have access to all the previous projects that we've funded that council has authorized. And so we expect similarly to go through a similar process, and it is going to vary across different programs, but when our community responsive grants will go to city council as a full package eventually, and we will share that, and that'll be public. So we don't have a perfect roadmap, but that information as it's been made available, and thank you, James, for creating links to the previous 2 RFPs. That'll continue to be made available online on our website. And for folks that are interested in tracking that, I encourage folks to sign up to our listserv as well. Our email list.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. And I'll drop a link to the email list sign up as well in a moment. I think that's the end of the questions we have in the chat. If you have questions live, feel free to raise your hand and you can ask it. We'll call on you or add more to the chat. We still have a little bit of time, almost 15 minutes if folks want to. So. Yes, Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, for workforce and contract, is that individual of only organization can have that contract with?
It's generally going to be targeted for, you know, nonprofits in order, you know, that are going to do that workforce training and or contractor support. But we expect, you know, a lot of that work happens through subcontractors and others that are working with them. And so I think generally the grant opportunities for doing workforce and contractor development are open to nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I will just say there's going to be more discussion and there's more work for us to do around as we get to our RFPs, our grant application period. When we get to that opening period, there's going to be conversations we're going to have, particularly now as we're in person again in many instances, and we're doing more in-person meetings just around how we create opportunities for folks to partner up. And we know that we've seen that happen on our projects, that there's been a lot of collaboration and partnering from different types of organizations, and wanting to continue creating those spaces so folks can find each other and find ways to work together on projects.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Right, and I'm monitoring the chat. I went ahead and did drop that sign up for email updates if folks want to sign up for a list, but I don't see any other questions coming in quite yet. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to track the comments or feedback that didn't make it into the draft? I know that was brought up in the beginning of the presentation in connection to RFPs and how that feedback is going to be implemented there. But I was just unsure to like which feedback and questions were actually going to still be used. So if there's like a way to track that, if I could get some more clarity there, that'd be great.
Yeah, Ariadna, I hope I said that right, but we do. So when you navigate to the page with the climate investment plan, there's both a link to the summary of changes that were made that describes what were the changes between the preliminary draft of the plan from March to this draft. So there's one document that just says, here's a full list of the summary of changes across the sections. And then there's also another link to the comments that were received on the preliminary draft. And so you can go to that page, and it contains, in a few different ways, we organize the letters that we received, all of the comments that we received, and then we also have what we're calling a synthesis, which is where we kind of summarized all the comments, and then described, both what was comments that supported the work, comments that give us good thoughts that we were considering as part of the revisions, and then comments that, generally speaking, were out of scope, that were something that either fell into a level of detail that was focused on implementation or something else. So there's not a specific document that speaks to like all those pieces, but it's probably exists across those 2 to 3 documents around the sort of what was the summary of changes, and then what was the summary of the comments. And between those two, you should be able to find some of that information. But it's not perfectly what you described, but it should be captured between those few different documents.
Got it. Thank you.
We'll stay here for another few minutes and hope that encourages folks to share more questions. But
Yeah,
obviously, if you don't get your questions here now too, we're around.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And just want to note that in the chat, June just put in those documents that you talked about, the summary of changes, key takeaway. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jim. Right, folks. I think we'll start to call. We'll get ready to call it here another minute and give folks back some time out of their days. But we'll simmer here and linger here for another about 45 seconds before we call it, if there's no other questions.
Oh, we have some appreciations coming in, but then also a question. What plans does PCEF have if the revenue generated through the tax is below the projected amounts?
Yeah, we adjust. I think that's an important part that maybe we're going to need to speak to within the plan itself. But it's precisely that this reflects our best estimates around our 5-year plan, and at the same end, not everything will happen tomorrow, and so it will be likely looking across our programs and finding where those adjustments are going to need to happen. And those will continue to be open conversations with the committee. Is that may just, we need to, depending on the degree to which it's a reduction, may need to be that we need to make a plan amendment and adjust downwards. And so, as folks know, the economy is a wild thing, and so things will go up, things will go down, and we will continue to respond to that. This reflects our best estimate, and to the extent that things are markedly different from our estimates here today, it would be follow-up conversations to see with the committee and ultimately with City Council where we make those adjustments.
Some more appreciation. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah. There's been a lot that's happened here. Just want to appreciate everyone. As we screened the list and saw some of the many faces, names that have tracked and engaged with us and provided thoughtful comments, we just really appreciate it and appreciate you all coming here and look forward to seeing more comments.
Oh, we do have a hand up. Huda Yusuf. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, it's not a question, it's a kind of comment. I would like to commend the PCF team for the work you have been doing. It's really an amazing job. I believe the process was very participatory and engaging, which captures the community needs and priorities. So as currently we have been doing on the planning grant, and we look forward for the release of the RFPs. And also I would like to assure the continued ECRC support in all the process. So I would like to thank all the team for the amazing work you have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Many of the staff are here that have been supporting this process, and obviously many others that aren't here. So just really appreciate that, and it's hands down to a lot of the team that you see before you. But I would particular thank you and to the architect around June, who's architected a lot of this process. I thought we were going to give you all some time back, but maybe a little bit less. Thank you all. Hope you all are enjoying a little bit of a cooler Monday, and we hope to see many of you this Wednesday and then onward. Thank you.